All right, and we are live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Global Citizens. My name is Calvin. I am the show's host and also its creator. So, my guest for today is actually a TCK coach. She is a relocation expert. Her name is Miss Megan Norton. Megan is, as I mentioned, an intercultural specialist and a trainer who has lived in 10 countries, 5 states in the United States, and has visited over 30 countries. She holds a Master's of Arts in Intercultural and International Communication from American University and Masters of Art in Strategic and Business Communication, whereby she actually applies the knowledge now to help people who are relocating to a new country and especially as a support to third culture kids. So, hi, Megan. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Calvin. Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. How's your day today? I think now it's 8 p.m. in Michigan, right?
It is. Yep. So it's just ending, and I know it's what, 8 or 9 a.m. your time?
It's 8 a.m. Oh, sorry, it's 7 a.m. actually
Oh,
in
my
Jakarta.
goodness.
Yeah,
How's
no worries.
Tuesday?
Uh, Hopefully better than Monday,
Oh,
but since I haven't been outside for a while, so doesn't really make much difference anyway.
get outside today.
It's not too recommended, but okay, I'll try.
Well,
Maybe in my
okay.
car.
Just open a window, get some fresh air, hear the birds.
All right, all right. Okay, so we will now dive into the very first question. Yeah. Okay, so it's customary for a TCK to first who is on my show. Maybe the first question will be something whereby you will really hate me for it, and that is first is the definition of home for yourself. And if you don't mind, please tell us a little bit more of your TC quest. This is a term on my show whereby you tell us about the countries you have lived in.
Yeah, exactly. I've watched a handful of your episodes, and so I came prepared to think about this question in particular. And I'm not annoyed. I'm just like, okay, it's another opportunity to say, do you want the 5 second version or the 5 minute version? But yeah, like you said, I've lived in 10 countries, and in the US I've lived in 5 states. So I'm very homeful, I would say. Um, and I think that home in itself has um, I've changed definitions of what home is for me depending on the stage and the age. So if you had asked me that when I was 10, I would probably have a very different answer than when I was in college or high school and now. So um, I would say that I don't think that I'll ever live in the 9 other countries outside of the U.S. again, but all of them are a heart home. So I definitely carry them with me, and so I use that terminology a lot with like TCK saying. You have heart homes that maybe you won't be able to go back to them, but they are a part of you. So I would say that home for me is where my emotional and my physical needs are met. And so that leads me to say that it can either be relational. People can be my home because they meet emotional needs. It can also be a place where um, I would say when I identify a certain environment as my home or a house as my home, that plays into the physical needs. But it's been a challenge my whole life to give a short answer for that.
Yeah.
And you know that TCKs have the long version, short version, but typically when I ask somebody, or meet somebody, I'll say, "What's your story?" instead of saying necessarily, "Where are you from?"
All right. Okay. Well, would you believe it or not that you're living in 10 countries? That you've lived in 10 countries and you've been to 30 countries. It's not the most. I guess Believe you're actually, I think, second among the number of people who live in the most country. I think the record is at 12,
Yeah.
and the
Okay.
most number of countries visited is at 150.
Ah, goals.
Yeah, yeah. By the way,
Yeah.
there's 195 nation. There's 195 unofficially in the under the UN Charter. So that person is short of 40. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
really cool.
Well, I mean, and they're TCKs.
Yes, correct. That is correct.
Yeah. That's part of the
Okay.
profile. Yeah. You know what's interesting, Calvin? I was listening to a podcast recently called TCK Care, the podcast by
Yeah.
Stephen Black. And
Yep.
he had John from TCK Tales on his podcast. He was interviewing him. And this was literally 2 days ago that I heard this metaphor, this analogy of home. And I mean, I want to credit them for this analogy, but it was so clear to me that because home is so complex and nuanced for TCKs, and you know it. You're a TCK yourself, and sometimes I'll say to TCKs, what are your anchors? That could be community, that could be traditions, that could be family or friends. Those could be your emotional and physical needs as home. And in the TCK book, Barbara Knuckles makes the model of
Yep.
anchors. But I loved what John and Stephen said, is that what is the difference between an anchor and a root? And anchors provide stability, but roots have this idea of permanence. So I thought their analogy was really poignant, because TCKs do talk about anchors and how homes can be anchors, but roots, that gets into attachment and commitment and all those things TCKs avoid. So it's interesting, that analogy for home.
Okay. Okay, she went ahead of my next question.
Oh,
So that
sorry, Calvin.
no,
I
that's
just
really
get so
appreciated.
excited talking about TCK things.
Not
Let's
to
go on.
worry, not to worry. I really appreciate it because, well, you mentioned you've watched some of my show. That is typically one of the answers. That one of the questions I'll be asking, and you went ahead of it. So I'm really happy about that. Okay, so for those who just tuned in for the very first time, yeah, Global Citizens is a platform whereby I invited people with multicultural backgrounds, such as TCKs, primarily, of course, digital nomads and expatriates, and on occasion, I will also invite international speakers. The reason why is because when you look at the media, people who has experienced life overseas may always seem all the rosy, all the beautiful things that may, well, that is associated. I mean, there's no way you put a life that is considered all your pain on social media. But the thing is that there are a lot of physical aspect to it, and of emotionally, it's draining. And as a result, I want people to actually be able to be themselves, to tell what is their personal story, so that you know what is actually the lifestyle of a multicultural. And okay, for Megan, I actually the next question is going to be asked on how does your perspective differs because of the countries that you have lived in outside of the US, and also does it as ever affect your relationship with your parents or romantic partners?
All right, let's dive into this question, Calvin.
Yep.
Be a little vulnerable here. Um, yeah, so you're talking about three different kind of community members or
Yep.
stakeholders in my life.
Yep.
One being my passport country.
Yep.
Um, and what's interesting, so I grew up as a diplomat dependent. So when you're talking about passports, I held my US national passport and I held my diplomatic passport. And so that we don't go into another tangent, I'm not going to go into system identity passport. I'm just going to stick with my nationality passport.
Yep.
Um, and again, I would say it depends, how my perspective has changed from my passport country. My U.S. citizen passport. Like I've lived in 4 countries as an adult TCK, and every time I've come back to the U.S., I notice how I've either internalized U.S. values or I have, said like that doesn't align with my worldview or my belief system anymore. So it's interesting. I'm curious if I go back overseas and I come back and I'm like, what kind of U.S. citizen am I now? But just kind of like wrap up this idea of my affiliation or loyalty with the U.S. It's very complex, and I've negotiated it, on multiple levels. But I've recently actually I've written an article about U.S. cultural values and what I've observed now in this coronavirus season of how like very individualistic communities, very self-reliant, indulgent, all of these are like the very extreme cultural values that Americans hold. How they've shifted a little bit along the spectrum to more collectivistic and maybe holding restraint and being able to hold that intention. So it's interesting because I've seen how more of my cultural values I've absorbed and adopted into my lifestyle are being questioned and celebrated and adopted in my own community here. So I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And so I think that, yeah, where there's been tension for me in my relationship with the US, I also embrace it as an opportunity to be a bridge builder as a TCK. So there we go. There's the passport. Okay, for your question is 3-pronged, right? And then with my parents, again, in emerging adulthood, you have this tension of where your own personal values maybe align with your parents' or family's cultural values. And I personally think, and I think research shows that in general, maybe the millennial generation, adolescence is extended now through like early 20s. And so, especially in the US, where there was a mindset when you turn 18, you're out of the house, you have to be independent, I'm seeing more and more this shift in understanding that it's okay to live at home with your parents. It's okay to live communally, with lots of roommates, to share a big house. And I appreciate that from more of, my background growing up, where I lived in cultures where that was the norm. And so I had to deal with some perceptions and some judgment from extended family that I made a choice to live back home with my parents as a 30-year-old. So, it's just different cultural values. But, my parents, in having, I was raised in cultures where, yeah, you live at home until, you're married or you go abroad or, you have a stable job. And so they've embraced it. That's been our culture all my life. So that hasn't been conflicting with my parents. I would say one of, when you asked me this question to think about, I think one of the most evident values that I think we have had to had more conversation about is our value of faith and how that's expressed. We had very strong faith traditions in my house growing up, despite our transitory lifestyle. That was something that was very consistent in terms of tradition and how it was expressed, both inside the house and externally outside the house. And as an adult, in living abroad, in going to different places of worship, I found that our faith values differ a little bit. And it just took a lot of conversation. It just took like, why do you do that way now? And we respect each other. Our faith traditions differ a lot now, but I really value that my parents respect the choices I've made as an adult. So the third, the third part of your question, Calvin, it was with partners, right?
Yeah, with your romantic partners,
Okay.
with your significant others.
Do I have permission to pass?
We'll get back to that later. Not to worry.
No, but okay. All I want to say really about that is I think this is the one place where I still have the most area to grow in and learn about myself in terms of what are some challenges I'm finding and struggles that are because of my TCK upbringing, and maybe is it because of my community I'm living in. It's just been a lot of self introspection of what are my attachment styles, what are my commitments to people and to places. And so I'll just leave it at that, Calvin.
Okay, not to worry, not to worry. Maybe if I find a chance, I'll get back to that. All right. Okay, not to
You're
worry
pretty
about
persistent.
All right. Earlier you mentioned about your background. You're a child of a diplomat, yeah. So I actually want to tackle this a bit. So we discussed this before the beginning of the show. So with how prevalent social media is in today's society is because, well, there's no way, as I mentioned in the introduction, when we depict our life in social media, it is always the most beautiful, crisp, perfect version of who we are, right? So there's a term that has been popping up called the diplobrats, whereby basically, because as if a lot of the viewers might not be aware, a lot of times those children who are of diplomatic background and maybe they could be sent to a country that is a lot more well-to-do or developed, they would be given a certain entitlement in a sense is because, well, they need to ensure of the family safety. So with social media you can always just put I don't know, maybe a Bentley that will be used to send you over to a house of an ambassador, or maybe they will be put in a fancy dinner. And when they took a picture of this on social media, of course, they attract followers and those who followers. And as a result, it gave them a sense of, in a sense, maybe a sense of boost on their ego, or unfairly, there could be this. The term diplobras is said it's because these kids could be entitled, or they might not have upheld what is the value that actually their parents is supposed to be, and sometimes also because of the image on social media, it is unfair. Maybe they are actually really nice guys or nice young ladies, but well, when they put pictures of the privileged lifestyle that they have, this becomes an unfair image. So, do you feel that there's is kind of like a regulation or any kind of guidelines that should be given before they post such things?
Oh man, Calvin, that's a huge question. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh man,
If I,
you know, something that I'm grateful for is that in
yeah,
my upbringing, social media wasn't really around. That's dating me a little bit, but I think it's such a added factor for
if
parents.
anybody want
And
to guess how old is Megan, please put in the comments.
no.
I'm kidding, I'm just kidding, I'm just kidding. No, if you want to, please go ahead.
Oh my goodness.
I'm just kidding. All right.
I am
Sorry, Megan.
youthful.
Sorry, Megan. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, I think technology and TCKs. Wow, that's a research project in itself, and the uses of technology in terms of perpetuating an idea of lifestyle. I think what I would say briefly about this, and again, I feel like every single question that you've asked me and may ask me could be like its own like recording,
Yeah.
but especially technology and TCKs. And you mentioned I'm a TCK mentor and coach. One of my audiences are our parents, because parents are asking adult TCKs, either am I messing up my child in taking them abroad, or what are some best practices, what's healthy boundaries, how can I create a sense of home, stability, and roots. So what I say to parents, I'm not a parent, so I feel that I don't have authority in that kind of identity for adult TCKs who are parents and also raising TCKs. So I frame what I say is I don't tell parents how to parent. I tell them what TCKs need. And what I see with TCKs and technology is that they need boundaries, and parents need to monitor the image. One, for security reasons, but two is how much are they identifying with quote unquote a system. So if they're using diplobrats, for example, as a hashtag or as a movement, I think that's a little problematic, and I think it's a little concerning because they are identifying with a system. And in my experience, what happened to me when I was, I think, 21 or 22, my diplomat passport was taken away. I was not allowed access, or I was not even existent per se, in that world. And that was a huge identity loss, and I didn't realize how much of my identity was anchored in that system. And so I know that's more of a, like that's more of a broader topic, but realistically, I think that it comes down to the labels that we create for ourselves and the image that we're trying to create for ourselves, and really how authentic is that and how sustainable is that. So more questions than answers, but something to really think about.
All right. Okay. Earlier you mentioned on the recent epidemic. So first off, I need to a little delay, but I need to send a lot of prayers and regards to those who are affected by this. I actually do know somebody whose relative actually passed away recently due to contacting corona. So
I'm
regards,
sorry to hear.
yeah, and but well, this is the current situation that we are living in this world today. So we have to make the best of it. Okay. So this was actually something that I was asked on in a recent interview whereby I was interviewed. So by my past guest, his name is Ben Vogel. Ben is host of the show Ben There, who he was inspired to do this after coming to my own show. So I want to tackle a little bit on an issue that has always been prevalent on today's society, and that is on racism. So what during that interview, I mentioned that racism could be traced back as early as during the war times, as because if let's say your great grandparents, maybe let's say we mention on Japan, I don't mean to offend anybody here, but this is how the actual factual history is. So if let's say your granddad's history with Japanese is that their battalion was attacked or hacked down by a group of Japanese, it created a sense of hatred to being associated to the Japanese themselves. And well, now in today's world, due to Corona, I have been seeing a lot of articles on attacks on Chinese, especially. There's even one funny situation whereby a Korean was told to go back to China when she is a Korean. So this is something that continues to prevail in today's society, and the thing is that we still can't blame it. It's because, well, I guess this is just human nature. We fear the unknown. So Megan, as somebody who educates younger generations of TCK, how do you feel that this unnecessary hatred or unfounded resentment could be dispelled before carrying over into a change?
Calvin, these questions. They're so they're very layered. They're very important questions. So I first want to say thank you for asking them. I think it
Yeah,
takes courage to name some of these
yeah,
topics. It takes courage to create conversation and dialogue around this. And I would hope that more people do engage in healthy dialogue, because I think foundationally that's what it takes. I think it's for lack of a better term, really gross when social media, there are one-sided arguments. There's not a space to have healthy and intentional dialogue. Um, People are dismissive. I think that goes into, I think it was Daniel Kellerman. Uh, I think it's his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. But the brain is wired to make very snap within second decisions, to filter in about, is this a fight or flight moment? Is this a safe spot? So, all that to say, thinking slower, the brain is able to, I would say, hold space for more logical discussion, more logical approaches to a situation. And I agree. I wrote an article recently on Thrive Global about this, about how these snap judgments based on external appearance is creating fear. And how can we stop that? Well, man, huge question, right? I think that third culture kids have a unique position in this as bridge builders, as ones who have grown up in diverse and often inclusive or promoting inclusivity environments. With growing up in those environments and having those skill sets, TCKs are bridge builders. They're able to hold different perspectives, and see different perspectives. And I think that's really important to start creating spaces to have those dialogues, um, and not have these dismissive, really attackful arguments. When I talk to parents, especially for parents who are about to go overseas, with pre-departure orientation, where their kids have never lived in another culture. For parents who are taking their family to a place where the environment might have people who externally look different, I always say your action is going to speak so much louder than your words. I say, when you're walking down the street with your children and you see a situation where your kids have never been in and maybe you've never been in, and you're holding their hands, and if you squeeze tighter of their hands, that's sending an unconscious subliminal message to your children that, hey, be on alert. And simplistically, that difference could be equated to negativity. So parents need to be aware of the links that their children are internalizing. Is different negative or is different good? And what I proclaim is that difference isn't good or bad. It's just different. And so being aware of your actions, and then also if a situation comes up that made your family uncomfortable, engage in that. Like, why do I feel discomfort? What is that speaking into? And then that's where you see where your beliefs, where your worldview, where your attitudes are coming out. But it does take that discomfort to lean into this discussion. It's uncomfortable, but I would really want to advocate for TCKs who have already felt that discomfort, who have processed it, who have said, yeah, I realized that came from that value or that came from that belief, and let's look at other perspectives. It's only going to happen through that dialoguing.
All right. Okay. My next question is going to be a little easier. I think I kind of burned your brain quite early now.
I
Apologies on
know,
that.
Calvin. I feel like this is. I have to tell you, I recently. I mean, I as an independent consultant, like I do work in higher ed, and these are some of the interactions that I've been asked by inclusion offices. So bravo.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. I will ask you something now that is actually easy in a sense compared to my previous one. So, how? Maybe can you please elaborate on what your career as a TCK coach or mentor, and how do you actually started doing this though?
And what was the last question?
Oh, sorry. Okay. So, how do you first started being a TCK coach or a TCK mentor?
How did I get into it? Oh, you're a little frozen.
Yes. Oh, okay. Sorry. Oh, okay.
That was
Is it
it.
better?
Yes. Okay. So the first part of your question is, what do I do as a TCK mentor or coach? And then the second, I just want to confirm, is how did I get into it?
Yep. Correct.
Okay. All right. Let's go for the first question. So as a TCK mentor and coach, I work with I work with three primary audiences. One, I work with parents, which I spoke to, with pre-departure orientation, with reentry, with also I work with a lot of TCK teens, and so dialoguing with parents about what do they need to consider before going to university. The second audience is I've worked with higher education, specifically here in the U.S., to more to popularize and standardize and normalize the term TCK, because I think that third culture kids have unique needs at university, and so I would say that I find ways to talk with diversity and inclusion offices, with international student service offices, to talk about the needs of TCK university students. And then my third audience are TCKs themselves. And in the past 5 years, I've worked exclusively with teens and college age TCKs, really talking about identity, how to transition well to university. And that has been such a blast. And I said my little tagline, what I say to parents, I don't tell them how to parent. I just say what TCKs need. What I tell teens and young adult TCKs, younger than me, I'm so
Yep.
youthful, is
I did not say anything.
I say that. Well, okay. I'm curious the numbers people are throwing out there in the chat. So I like to say to teens, I'm trying to be the mentor that I didn't have when I was your age, and to college students, I'm being the mentor I didn't have and I needed when I was your age. So that's the approach I take, and also I want to own up to the fact that the mentoring that I do is very much from a Western perspective, and I went to U.S. universities, so that is my my approach and my kind of baseline for coaching too. So I don't want to say that I am the expert of relocation to any part of the world. Mostly it's U.S. bound here. Oh, and then how I got into it. Let me quickly say that.
Yeah.
So yeah, Calvin, it's been a journey. It's been very zigzag. It's been non-linear, to put it bluntly. But it's all been built on to each other. So part of the reason why, I've gotten so much education, higher ed education, is the fact that, well, this goes into my unprocessing, my TCK-ness. I don't know if you felt this, like if you feel uncertain about what's next, just go back to school, get another degree. I feel like that's not the answer for my next crossroads in life, but maybe it is. But that's why, I did like 2 masters back to back, essentially. But they built on each other, and so I don't have regrets. I think they've both been very pivotal in my professional career, in that I've worked in communication and I did intercultural and international communication at American University, because I was able to concentrate on researching TCK identity formation. And then afterwards, I'm like, oh, what do I do with this? And then it became apparent that parents were asking me, for advice, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna stay in the TCK mentoring lane for a while.
All right. If you want, you can tell them to watch my show. I have a lot of TCKs on my show. Yeah, it's a lot more summarized.
It's amazing. It really is. It's very entertaining.
Do watch out though, since I do allow the vulgarities, so please do be careful on that. I don't really use much of it, but it came up with 2 once in a while from either myself, my guest, or both of us. So yeah, that's something we need to work on. But
you keep it real, though. You keep it real. This is reality TV, people.
Well, yeah, in a sense. All right. Earlier mentioned one of the key area that you worked on is on the TCK Teens, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So recently I did an episode with one of the person who inspired the creation of the show. He is millennial expert and global speaker, Mr. Vivek Iyani. He's in Singapore now. He can't really go out since there's a lot of travel plans and etc. So if you guys are in Singapore, by luck, and you guys want to consult a little on this, you guys can find him. Okay, so why I actually requested Vivek on the show is because I noticed a phenomenon whereby in the 90s, which is the era of globalization, is also the era that people considered that the generation of the millennials are considered to be the one which is considered the most problematic. And for one thing is they display characters that is opposite of due to the generational gaps, I guess, like being lazy or entitled or etc. Now, Megan, my question to you is, how much do you think can a TCK or those of a multicultural background could be contribute to the world more in regards to this?
Oh, sorry, I lost connection for a quick second, Calvin. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, okay, sorry about that. Okay, for those watching, I sincerely apologize if it can be a little patchy. Our StreamYard platform or OBG and especially Zoom will be packed nowadays. It's because that's the only way we can work. So there's a lot of time whereby the connection would be affected. Yeah. Okay, so how do you think TCK could assist in leading or working with the millennial generation? That's the question.
Okay, great. Thanks. I heard it that time. Well, I think it depends. It depends on, can you clarify exactly what third culture kid, like a Gen Z third culture kid or a baby boomer third culture kid or a millennial?
Gen Z onwards. Because those who are born in around 1985 to 1999 are considered Gen Y already, which is my era. Yeah,
okay.
People already know my age. I've told you guys so many times, so it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. I think I'm understanding the framing of the question.
Yep.
So, I did this whole short study on millennials and the millennial generation and TCKs, just very informal, and found that the characteristics broadly kind of intersect of like not necessarily loyal to a certain company or image or brand, and actually are very well traveled, curious, and tech savvy, and those are all like if you think of a TCK profile, those align well. So I would say TCK millennials are actually quite good bridge builders between older generations and Gen Zers, because, well, one, I think because millennials are and Gen Y are digital natives. So, and of course, Gen Zers are digital natives as well. So there's that. But millennials had to operate in assisting and developing like programs with older generations who are not digital natives, right? They adopted this culture. So that's one way I think millennials are very positioned to still be bridge builders between generations. I think also millennials thrive in the digital world. So I think there's a lot of street credit with millennials using TikTok and WhatsApp and everything. It's
I
keeping,
don't use TikTok though. I don't know what it is. I just find
so
it weird.
yeah, or Snapchat. I don't know. Like, I think that again, that's one of the driving factors of millennial TCKs who can really relate to other digital natives.
Okay. All right. I actually have final two questions. So the first of the final is first is, do you ever feel a TCK could ever settle down, and should they be encouraged to settle down?
Yes, and yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
please do.
Okay. So, okay. Calvin, your questions are always two-pronged. Okay, so the first question is, um, should they ever settle down? Oh yeah, should
Yeah.
they? Yeah. Well, okay. Yes, I believe so. I think that, I mean, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of TCKs. If we like really broaden the definition of TCKs, okay, well, I'm not a fan of doing that. I would say CCKs, cross-cultural kids, they, TCKs are a subsect of that. But I mean, that includes traditional TCKs, cross-cultural, migrant, refugee. I mean, so many people have settled into one place. I myself personally am a second generation third culture kid, and my aunts and uncles are settled in their communities. And so I think it happens, and I think it's good. It's a good thing. I do think there's a difference, Calvin, between the word settled and well adjusted. I think
Okay.
I am settled here, which kind of is icky for me to say, honestly, but I don't think I'm well adjusted here yet. There's a difference. But so I think it happens. I think it's good. And I think that goes into the second question of should they be encouraged? And yes, because I think the message to third culture kids too often is that you are unique and you are terminally unique. And with that, it means you will never fit in, you will never belong, you will never find a place that you feel that sense of belonging or that will accept you. I think if that's a internalized message for TCKs, they'll never feel that they can settle down. And I think that's a very problematic message that often gets attached to TCKs, and TCKs then run with it. And they're like, well, I'm a TCK, so I can't settle. And when they say I am a TCK, they are aligning their entire identity to the TCK profile. And that I would say is extremely problematic because your whole identity is not a TCK. I mean, you think about gender, you think about hobbies, you think about faith affiliations, you think about your extended community, your extended family, you know, all of that is who you are. And so I would like to perpetuate the message of give yourself the freedom to settle. Um, and and that is fine for a TCK.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good message actually. Believe it or not, there's actually I think in my whole in throughout my 42 episodes, I've only known of two who, in a sense, settled down in a as they are married, and well, one of them already was expecting a kid at that time. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that time I think how to settle down in a sense is actually finding a partner that can understand you is
Mhm.
because that is that is a reason. However, it's not going to get rid of the travel bug though. That's
Right.
yeah,
Right. And that's key. I'm not advertising for TCKs to never travel. And I agree with you. A lot of my friends have have found home in their partner. And that's what I mean by my home definition is where your emotional and physical needs are met. And so they found that in a partner. And so that's something to look forward to, I guess. But TCKs are so adaptable, flexible, and they have that innate kind of trait and skill set, I would say, to travel. So it's a both and. It's not a settle or go. Like it's both. But right now, stay home and stay safe.
yeah. Guys, that's what Megan said. Please stay home and stay safe. Yeah. The thing is that we don't know how long this epidemic will last. So yeah, we try
Yeah.
to keep our health as well. You don't have your money, well, it's problematic, but you can earn it. But if you don't have your health, you can't earn your money at all. Okay, so this is going to be the last question for Megan. Okay, so what advice or books do you have for a TCK who is going to college, or maybe they are at a certain crossroads in their life? Or just to add a little kick, this is actually something that I actually experience a lot, being from Asia. Those TCK who is guilt ridden by their parents to stay put.
Mm.
Yeah, that sucks.
Oh, well, Calvin, let me just acknowledge your last statement
Yeah,
of um, I would say embrace this time, embrace it. I think that yeah, family values, family expectations are, I mean, are as diverse as and are so diverse everywhere. um,
yeah,
and I would say that yeah, just lean into the gratitude of this time being with your parents. Um, so actually, I want your book suggestions because I'm actually looking at my books here, and I'm like they're very Western, I would say, but actually one that I feel that is universal
yeah.
is
Oh,
Emotional
emotional detox.
Detox. Yeah, by Sherianna Boyle, because I think at least in my adulthood, I either numbed emotions or I dismissed them as very important information or indicators about my emotional health. And so, I mean, this book is so tabbed everywhere, and I use it a lot in different like mentoring sessions to because it's very practical in like um, naming emotions and some mindfulness exercises. And especially now that we're all at home, that we're all um, maybe stuck at home, I think our emotions can be a roller coaster. So I would say check out this book. It's a good roadmap to being more in touch with your emotional well-being, which also inadvertently affects your mental well-being, your physical well-being, your spiritual well-being. So there's one. Um, I am on a Brown kick.
Oh, Renee Brown. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I heard about this.
Braving the Wilderness. So, in reading this book, I discovered she is to use a label, a U.S. American domestic TCK. So she moved around within the U.S. And in doing so, I think there's a lot of intersectionality with the TCK, who's moved internationally in sense of belonging and worthiness. Um, and so I would say check that out. And I would say, last but not least, this one.
Oh, Global Cosmopolitan. All right.
Yeah, by Linda Brim. This one's more, I would say, academic and kind of text heavy, but it's in that there's a lot of gems in how to frame your skill set in a career or frame your skill set in an interview. I think, the TCK profile, it's full of benefits, privileges, and also challenges. And Linda Brim in her book really highlights how do you frame that on a resume? How do you frame that in a job interview? I think those are very practical ways she mentions.
All right. Okay. So earlier you asked me if I have a book recommendation from myself. Is it?
Yes.
Okay, just to let you guys know, I'm actually not a book kind of guy. I am actually more of an audio type of learner. I like to watch documentaries and videos more. So my documentaries now is actually not I would recommend, as I'm currently watching one on the biography of Arnold Schwarzenegger and one of my own personal idols, Sir Richard Branson. So they are not really recommended, as they actually want you to actually go out a lot more.
Okay.
That's one. But okay.
Well, thanks for
Uh,
sharing.
there's actually one show that I know it's actually people tend to people love it, but they actually tend to not tend to underestimate its strong meaning. If you guys have ever watched, there used to be a show called The Avatar, which is an earlier Nickelodeon cartoons back when I was a kid, at that time when during my preteen years. Now, why I actually love this show so much is actually it teaches you on the importance of drawing wisdom from every culture that you are exposed to. As well, that is the theme of the show itself. As for one thing, is that I think that is what makes TCK unique in a sense, is because having been exposed to multiple ethnicity and culture, you draw from them. You are exposed to issues that's not common in your home or in your own home country. Sorry, and as a result, well, you develop a certain new perspective. You develop an idea. You form a very unique character of your own. So I guess that's something that I can recommend. A lot of the things that I actually learn is in a unique way is through entertainment itself. It's because I actually reflect on what they are, what is the hidden meaning, what is the agenda with it. I think there's a very old cartoon called Fern Gully that teaches you on the importance of nature. So yeah, that is some ways that I actually learned. Believe it or not, this is actually taught to me by my own father, who used to bring us to movies. And then what will happen is he will sit us down for ice cream or any kind of junk food, and then he will just tell us, "So what do you guys learn from the movie?" So
Hmm.
this is how he always educate us, and that is a method that I applied. Okay, that is actually the end of this episode of Global Citizens, episode 42. So first off, I need to thank all of those who tune in to watch today. Just to let you guys
Thank
know,
you.
as a host, I can't see who you guys are. I think this is part of StreamYard's feature. So yeah, I also don't want to change it, as because this way I can put in a lot more focus to my own guests. So there's first off, I need to do a special shout out for firstly Vivek Iyani. Vivek actually tuned in earlier. He left a like. So if you guys wish to be acknowledged, please leave a like so that I can see who you are. And there's also this individual called Junjun Namo Katimado. I'm so sorry if I butchered your name. I don't mean it, but yeah, I really tried to pronounce it. And there's Miss Wanda Turnbull. She left a comment actually. So yeah, hello.
Hi, Wanda.
Okay, so yeah, and lastly, of course, I need to thank Megan for giving her time to come to the show today. Megan, do you have anything that you may want to tell to the audience?
Wow. No, I think it's such an honor. Thank you, Calvin, for. Well, I actually want to say, kudos to Calvin for creating this platform. I think your voice is so needed. The voices that you bring on the show are so needed, so relevant, very helpful. I love that you're doing this, and I appreciate your audience. I appreciate this time to share a little bit more from my life and what I do in this sector.
All right. Yeah, you're most welcome. Okay, so other than that, I actually leave some referral code for Airbnb and StreamYard in the description box. Yeah, do check it out, guys, and redeem yourself something nice. I mean, it's nice to prepare it as well. In a sense, it's kind of like a hope for the corona to pass, for one thing. And I also leave some of Megan's social media links and her Instagram and her LinkedIn. If you guys do need to reach out to her, or maybe especially if you are parents of TCKs or CCK, do reach out to her if you have difficulty in bonding with your child. We've been through that. Trust me, it's not a very fun and easy experience. And like what Megan is actually doing for having her as a mentor to actually advise you on how to approach this delicate matter is something that is easier. Okay, and with that, that's the end of Global Citizens, episode 42. So again, thank you so much for coming, Megan. And
Thank you.
yeah, okay, see you guys next time. Bye bye.
Bye.